Welcome to the Serrano Brothers podcast. We are twin brothers who are pastors in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. We talk about faith, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, culture, and anything else we think is interesting. Thanks for joining. Hey everyone, welcome to the Serrano Brothers podcast. We have a treat today. We have Bishop Pre-Nominee, the Reverend Clark Brown, joining us. Just as a reminder for everybody, the pre-nominees have been, is it voted on like by the conference? They've been chosen by their conference and uplifted, and Pastor Clark has said yes to this. So welcome to the podcast, Pastor Clark. We're so glad that you're with us. Can you tell us where you're serving right now and what conference you're in?
Absolutely. So I serve at Trinity Lutheran in Pleasanton, and I am the interim pastor there. So I've been there just over a year and a half. And that's part of the Diablo conference. So prior to that, I was in Monterey, and that was part of the El Camino Real conference. So I still actually connect with the El Camino Real conference because when I was elected to the Synod Council, it was from that conference. And so, you know, this is a way to maintain connection between them and the Synod Council. So, you know, I joke that I have like 3 deans at this point because I talk with Christina in El Camino, and then John in Diablo, and then Cindy back in as the Dean of Interims. So
well, that's cool. We always think it's kind of a good thing to get to know you a little bit better. So the question that I have for you starting off is like, okay, so give me like a favorite childhood memory that's either inside or outside of the church. What is one of your favorite childhood memories?
Well, let's see. How far back do we want to go? That's a good question. I suppose that one that sticks out for me right away is right around my 5th birthday. My extended family had a tradition of going camping on the east side of the Sierras. And so at that point in time, my immediate family lived in Marin County, but we would travel down and meet the rest of the family there. And we had, you know, our camper or trailers, and just, I don't know, there's something about playing out in the dirt and hanging out by the creek and going fishing with my grandfather. And then I remember, since it was my birthday, they managed to bring a cake, but the best thing was that they made ice cream while we were out there. So, you know, when you're a 5-year-old, this is like, you know, the best thing ever. So that's one that sticks out for me. I don't know why, but
no, that's great. That was like the first thing that came to mind. That's what we're looking for, you know. So that's cool. There's nothing better than that homemade, like when you take it in the can and roll it with the rock salt, and there's just nothing better than that. You know, a lot of people don't know like what pastors do, but especially what pastors do in their off time. Do you have any kind of hobbies or any hobbies, or what do you do in your off time?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so for one, I do run and I bike, and you know, I enjoy doing that, but it's also really, I mean, I need to do that for the sake of exercise, and you know, especially the running is really kind of a spiritual practice for me. I just I take the time to try to quiet my brain from all the various worries that are running through it all the time, and just say, okay, where am I right now? And you know, connect with God that way. Besides that, though, I do stage acting. That's one of the things that I do in my spare time.
Well,
Yeah,
that's cool.
so that started a few years ago. once my daughter got to the point where she was pretty self-sufficient, then I started with musicals down in the Monterey area, and then also it's just the straight plays, dramas, comedies, that kind of thing. And then at some point, I honestly got a little bit tired of the Monterey scene, and I work with a voice coach, and just ask him, okay, so what do you think? Should I try something different? And he suggested that I audition for an opera chorus. And so at that point, I took the leap and auditioned with Opera San Jose. And to my shock, they actually cast me that season. So I ended up, being in an opera chorus means that you're singing along with the rest of the chorus most of the time. But you're acting on stage, and working with a professional company means that the level of professionalism is just at a higher level, and it's just so that's just a lot of fun. And it means that, for example, you are responsible for knowing your stuff, but your rehearsal time is less because you have to take that responsibility. So that's what I've been doing lately. And I've been doing that probably since 2016. And of course, pandemic was a big interruption to that. But currently in a production of Carmen,
Cool.
the festival opera in Walnut Creek. And if I seem a little tired, it's because this is Tech Week, and we open on Friday. So,
oh my goodness. Well, you heard it, folks. You could see Pastor Clark Brown in Carmen this week, or when does it open?
Tomorrow.
It opens tomorrow. Oh, well, actually, these won't come out in time, Clark, because we're dropping all these on September 2nd. It's a kind of controversial question, but what's your favorite stage show?
Yeah, that's
it's hard. I know. I'm a theater guy too, and like new, old, but what came to mind like at first?
Okay, so the best production I've been in, and that I enjoyed in terms of the musical category, was Young Frankenstein.
Oh, cool.
And in Young Frankenstein, I was the monster. I got to wear 6-inch lifts. So you can imagine I was, on stage like 6'7", and
wow.
You get it used to kind of looking down at people pretty quickly. But
that's cool.
That was a lot of fun. And of course, that's if you're familiar with it, it's just a great show.
That's awesome.
Do they do the putting on the Ritz number?
Absolutely.
It's such a great movie in general too. You said that you consider running like a spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other like spiritual practices that you like cling to?
Yeah, and it has varied over the years. So at times, it's been more of a regular use of like the daily offices prayers, like morning prayer, vespers, Compline. Compline is probably the one that I return to most frequently.
Nice.
And I do try to engage in contemplative prayer, ideally starting earlier in the day with time of silence and contemplation. Honestly, that's not something that is really as solid as I would like. It's honestly, it's hard to maintain that commitment. It's just not really embedded in me as a habit. But it's something that I do, and think it's really obviously really helpful in terms of remaining centered and just being connected to God, and knowing yourself, being as a beloved person, and living out of that. That's just really central to our call.
I think that's really, I think it's really cool that you said that, that it's not like, it seems like sometimes, I know with my own spirituality that like, I go through like seasons of spiritual disciplines, like sometimes the silence really works for me. Sometimes it doesn't work for me, and so I'll have to do something else for another season, and it just, I think over the years, I've learned to kind of trust that a little bit and just go like, okay, I'm done with this thing right now. Let's move on to something else, So I appreciate you saying that.
And as for our listeners who may not know what Vespers or Compline or some of those words mean, the Christian church in its history has had certain specific times throughout the day in which there are set prayers, and Vespers and Complines are names for, Vespers is the night prayer, Compline, well, Vesper is the like early evening prayer, Compline is like the night prayer. And so yeah, Clark, we all know that that ministry has ups and downs. Like there are huge successes and failures that we have. Can you tell us about a success in your ministry that when things are kind of rough, that you go, yeah, I did, we accomplished that?
Yeah. Well, let me give a couple different things, I suppose. So going back a ways, in many years ago now, in Monterey, there was a, when I got there, the congregation had not really changed much in their sanctuary for a long time, and things were worn out, So we do have to go through those time periods of updating, right? But I looked at this as something that we had to be patient about, and we needed to have some consensus as to what that was going to be when we made those changes. So again, I joke that sometimes the hardest thing for a pastor to do is to change the color of the carpet,
Mm-hmm.
and people will go to the mat for this. The carpet has always been red, and we will keep it red. But after lots of discussion and conversations about, including how we appear, and also say something about who we're welcoming, right? Are we locked into a past, all right, for the sake of ourselves, or are we willing to change? And so after time period of conversation, we engaged in that. Eventually the change, the actual renovation is maybe a month or two in the life of the congregation. The conversations leading up to that was a much longer period of time, and that was really truly effective. I mean, it changed the worship space, not just in appearance, but also making it a much more musical space where people wanted to come and sing together, and even outside groups wanted to come and perform there. So that's that's a good endpoint, right? Nice thing to say. Yeah, I helped do that. More recently, I think the work as an interim pastor has been very rewarding. So it's been a process of leading the congregation through a number of tangible things to get to a point where they can name, these are our values, right? And this is how we're going to act on them to go forward. Making some priorities as to what's most important and going from there. And of course, most of that, because I'm the interim, most of that's going to be taken up by the next pastor. But anyway, that's just, it was, I guess it exceeded my expectations in terms of how successful that was.
That's cool.
Especially, the process of simply going out and interviewing with community leaders and asking them, hey, what's going on in our community? What are the needs? And the information that my team got back was just completely eye-opening. They were blown away, and that really, can set the direction for the church. And they can refine that as they go forward. And
when you met with the community leaders, what kind of community leaders did you meet with?
So someone in like city government,
Okay.
School leader, like principal or superintendent. But I mean, honestly, principal is really good because they're closer to kids. Folks from the police department,
Nice.
Other clergy, and you can just make a list like that of people that would be good to talk with. But those are the people that we spoke with.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you so there's like these three expressions of church, right? We in the ELCA, we have three expressions of church. We have churchwide, we have the synod office, and we have the synod, and then we have the local congregation, right? What do you think the primary function of the synod office is? How would you describe the primary functions of the synod office?
So the synod office is primarily, I think, a connecting kind of role. So the synod office obviously is relating between congregations, and ideally helping congregations connect to each other. They also are relating between congregations and churchwide. They do, the synod office has a more direct link between congregations and churchwide than congregations directly to churchwide. So that really is the primary overall function. So much of what the synod office does, that is like the bishop and assistants to bishop, they're handling a lot of the administrative details to make that happen. There are just a lot of expectations there that administration is handled efficiently. And so that gets involved with, like, some of the most important things are candidacy for people who are being brought onto one of the rosters of the ELCA, and also call processes. And that's where congregations get, see the synod most actively, I suppose. And it's where there can be some consternation, right, about whether that's being handled well. I think that we're seeing that right now, that there's been some frustration for some call processes. Part of that is our synod staffing, in terms of just not having enough staff. But some of that also has been the pandemic, frankly. It's just made it very difficult. Many pastors just don't want to move. The pandemic has created a lot of uncertainty. And then furthermore, of course, we have expense in many sections of our synod. It's very expensive to live here. And so, where at one time maybe pastors really wanted to come to California, now maybe not so much. If it means that they can afford a house, living somewhere else, then that's very appealing. So
that's a direct thing that's happening here, and I live in San Carlos, and there's just a house right down the street from the parsonage that I live in. It's a very similar house. They're renting it out for $5,000-$6,000 a month, and so for pastors, that's not possible, right? Unless you have a spouse that's independently wealthy or in tech or something like that. It would be very hard for my congregation to survive if it didn't have a parsonage. And so I really identify with what you're saying around that. I think that's a real issue in our synod.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from you too about like the synod office in terms of connecting is like one of the huge ways that the synod office does that is by the candidacy process by which or the call process by which congregations are connected with pastors and how the synod sets that up. That's the most direct way. That's interesting. That's what I'm hearing, at least. Does that sound right?
No, that's true. I think that's where most congregations see the synod most actively.
Hey, Clark, so you were talking about the synod office, that there's more that they could do to connect with congregations. And can you say more about that? What it is you think that they can do?
Sure. Yeah, so I think that there's a huge need among our congregations for resources in terms of how we can pursue our mission. So most of the mission in the synod is going to happen on the ground in congregations.
Yeah.
And so we need some new ideas, right? We need to have some tools, right, that congregations can put into place to do ministry in our ever-changing world.
Yeah.
So that can happen through discipling teams or other kinds of teams, just offering events that offer some training. Of course, we've done this in the past. I think it's a good practice for us to continue this and to stay focused on, doing this, completing our mission, because it's just, it can't be said enough. The world is changed, right? And so our churches really need to approach things differently.
I think that's really great that you're saying that. Just for the lay people, what's a discipling team in our synod?
Sure. So we have in our synod created these committees that we've called discipling teams, and most of our discipling teams right now aren't truly active. It's evolved over the years. So at one point in time, we had only 3 discipling teams, and I think now we have 7. But ever since the point in time where we had 7, they haven't been really fully staffed, and they get filled by pastors and lay people, all of them. And they have various tasks assigned to them. Some of them are focusing on worship. Some are focusing on racism and things around ethnic ministry. We have a witness team, which is the primary team connecting with new mission starts. And we have a leadership team, which is focused on our rostered leadership primarily, and meeting those needs.
So your kind of idea is to kind of repopulate this, and as a way of connecting the synod, especially around issues around living in the church or being the church in the 21st century. That's what I'm hearing you say. Is that that fair? It's interesting because the very next question that we have, go Jerry.
Yeah. So your paperwork, and what you filled out, or at least what we can see online, right? It says, you say, many of our congregations are facing difficult decisions, holy closures, collaborative ministry, reduced staffed hours. And you say, I would like the synod to be more proactive in providing resources, training, events to help address the decline. How would you go about doing that?
Okay, so some of that I've addressed in
Right.
terms of using discipling teams. I guess what I have in mind also is that the people who would be on synod staff, and the bishop, as well as the assistants to the bishop, would focus some of their attention on discerning what things those resources should be. What tools should we offer, And so they would help facilitate our existing teams and develop training resources for congregations, develop ways that congregations can get into groups with each other and learn from each other. The other thing is that we do have leaders and congregations in the synod that are moving forward, right? That they're doing things that are effective, and generally we just don't know, right? I mean, sitting in each of our congregations, we don't know what St. John's by the 7-Eleven is doing that's working. We just don't. And so part of that connecting function of the synod would be to find out what's working in one place or another, and ask those congregations to share, right? And to be a training resource for other congregations.
I wonder if if the synod office could help in such a way to help localized churches see each other as extensions of each other's ministry rather than any kind of competition. Because I'm a big that's what I'm working on with St. Matthew down the street in Walnut Creek. I'm in Concord. That's what we're trying to do is really see each other as extensions of each other's ministry. But that kind of started from me and from Rustin, Pastor Rustin, down at St. Matthew. How much do you think it's the synod office versus kind of grassroots movements from congregations?
I think it can be both.
Yeah.
So I'm in the same conference as you, Jeremy, so that I've had the opportunity to meet Rustin and work with him some because he's chair of the Bishop Election Committee. But I've also just taken the opportunity to ask him questions about, well, what are you doing? And that has been really insightful. I think that so I think that, of course, that can happen between us, right? One-on-one. Unfortunately, I'm not sure that it does very often, at least not to the extent that it could. Again, so when I was in Monterey, I was there for a long time. And over those years, I repeatedly had conversations with another local congregation. And we did work together for many of those years, but it was always kind of limited. And I think part of that is that congregations get very attached to each other, right? As well as to their building and all of that. And so as soon as we start talking about doing things, ministry together, it gets kind of scary. I think people automatically see as, well, no, this is our church. And so we're going to hold on to that until the bitter end. So it's tough to overcome that. And I think all we can really do is have those honest conversations to say, something's got to give. We have to have some change here, because too many of our congregations at this point are just really tiny, and they get to a point where it's just Sunday worship, right? And there's no ministry going beyond that. That we can do a lot more, I think, if we have these collaborations. At that point, then you can say, well, we have money for a pastor, but we also have additional resources where we can have a youth minister, or we can have someone who's relating directly to the community in some other ways, and just expands things. So it's a difficult issue to overcome.
Yeah, I think
yeah, that's what I think we need to work towards.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that brings like to the next thing, which is like, as a synod, we kind of need to have a plan as a synod, and so I guess my question for you is like, not what would your strategic plan be, but how would you go about developing a strategic plan?
Okay, that's a big one. How do I go about developing a strategic plan?
Yeah.
Well, I guess the place to start would be to have a way for conversations, maybe within our conferences, to have these a sense about where other people think we need to focus on. Gathering information, I guess, is my go-to most of the time, to start there. If we gather some information about that and about what we can agree to, another team could essentially focus on just that. So again, I guess it is connected in my mind with where we find ourselves in terms of having so many congregations that are right there on the edge. And I think we do not have a consensus as to how to deal with that. Do we actively encourage congregations to merge? Do we actively encourage them to sell property or to keep it? Are we going to try to keep all the property so that we have an opportunity for future ministry? Or are we going to use those resources to strengthen, the ministries that are in a healthier state? But I don't think we have consensus on that. I hear a lot of different points of view, but that's where I would want to build some consensus, and then try to tackle that.
Yeah. No, I know for me, Clark, I would need to be convinced that it's a good thing to sell property, and especially, I mean, if anywhere else, I might I might have another view, but I feel like in the Bay Area, the one thing that we want to just hold on to is property, even if the synod holds on to it, maybe to convert into housing or, kind of to leverage our property for financial stability. But that's just where I'm at. But I know we sat around at tables at the roster leader gathering, and other people had other kinds of views on that about selling them, taking the money, and then using the money itself. But that's all.
Yeah, I can see both sides of that discussion, right? Or multiple sides, really. And yeah, it would be helpful to have some open conversations about that. Yeah. And maybe it would happen on a case-by-case basis, right? Of course, in terms of deciding how we proceed. One of the issues is, one of the conversations, I would just say in the Synod Council level, is that managing property is not something that the Synod does well right now. That's something that has been said very openly. And so that's another complication. We probably don't want to just hold property as it is, because basically that we would probably need a full-time staff person to just oversee property. I think some Synod offices do actually have someone who does that work. That is just their job. Yeah, I don't know if we necessarily want to do that, if that's the best use of resources also. So
yeah, part of the job I think of is just like when you become a pastor, you learn a whole lot by just doing the ministry. I think part of being bishop is you have to learn about what the job really is when you're doing it, right? and they take you to schools and all that other kind of stuff, right? For that.
Yeah.
Josh, I think we did number 9 already.
Yeah.
So what kind of gifts do you think that you would need to surround yourself with on Synod staff to complement who you are as a leader?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is to have someone who is one of these people who it comes very naturally for them to be a connector, you know. Just they form the relationships easily. I'm not saying that I can't do that, but I also know myself that I would benefit from having someone on staff that was their forte. So besides that, the people on staff are also almost by definition going to have to be doing this administrative kind of work, right? Whether they're involved with call processes or candidacy or whatever else. That's just a basic skill, I think, for the whole staff. And yeah, so yeah, I guess that's a given in my mind.
Yeah.
Let me think if there's something else that I can name that would be particularly helpful. Yeah, I guess, you know, the thing that really pops out for me is just that thing about making connections. So
yeah, we had on staff, well, the bishop had on staff the communications person who was full-time, Catherine Slayball. And I thought she did a really great job of like connecting congregations together, even though her job was communications. And I think her job was called communications and connections, but I'm not totally sure. But that seems like a really great role for somebody to have as a role on Synod staff is to have a person who's dedicated to that kind of communication and connections, and not just making it a part-time thing, like a real dedicated thing.
right.
So that you name that, I think, is important, because I thought we saw how well it went when that position was in place.
Yeah. So, and I guess I should clarify that there's two things. One is that very deliberate outward communication piece, which is part of a job description. The other thing is that I'm also thinking about the more intangible kinds of ways that people are just it's a personality thing, you know, that some people are just they excel at making those connections. You know, you have as pastors, you may think of someone in your congregation who just seems to know everybody, right? Mm-hmm. They walk down the street and they're greeted by 5 different people. It's those kinds of folks. The other thing I would add is just to say that the staff needs to be made up of a variety of people, right? we want to maintain diversity in our Synod. That's something that we're striving towards, and it has been a consistent goal for us. It's been tough for us at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's, of course, I guess I would almost take it as a given that's front of mind for me.
Yeah, thanks for naming that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. You kind of before we think that, you know, one of the most important times for a bishop to be present and show the connectedness of the synod office is like when sometimes churches are in conflict, whether they're councils fighting with each other or pastors and councils not getting along. What do you think your like conflict resolution style is when you enter those kinds of spaces?
I am a calm person, calm presence, especially in face of conflict. I have had to, unfortunately, have had to deal with this, and I think at the last few years being on Synod Council has just, frankly, sharpened those skills. And so for me, the important piece is to come and have the clear communication, to, of course, listen to people. If I'm asked to come in and engage in conflict, I want to listen to everyone and try to facilitate their communication with each other. I don't have a need to take sides or necessarily win an argument, and so, I mean, as soon as I enter in that situation, those kinds of situations, I do put on a professional hat of simply saying, it's time for my ego to be put to the side, right? And just, consciously do that. So, yeah, go ahead.
That was a great answer. Is there anything as you were coming into this podcast that you wish, like, that you were hoping we would ask you?
Well, not necessarily. I guess I would say that the one thing that I think I kind of assumed we would talk about is the question about, what's the reason for putting your name forward or letting your name go forward for the office. And so I would say that for that, I want to serve the Synod because I care for the church. And I care about how our health, how we connect to each other. And I want us to try to heal from all the challenges that we've been through. I feel a certain amount of responsibility, whether that's warranted or not, because being on Synod Council, I've seen kind of the center of a lot of our conflict. And so, I certainly, when was asked if I would allow my name to go forward, I felt that sense of, yeah, I should do this. I also would say that I believe that I have the gifts for this position. And part of what I mean by that is that I think that I would enjoy at least parts of being bishop. Now, that's not to say that I have an impression that it's going to be easy, or that, there are not going to be times when it's just really difficult, because I think it's going to be extremely difficult. Whoever ends up being elected bishop is going to face heartache and some very difficult times, and potentially ongoing conflict in our synod broadly. So that all goes into it, and I think that the last thing I would want to say, though, is that I really do care for the synod, and I'm at this point in my life where I can say, if I'm not elected, this is not going to be the end of my life, right? Right. And so it's important. It's important to say that it is. It's not defining for me, right? I look forward to being, beyond the Synod Assembly and beyond the election, and then being able to just, focus on what's next, whether that's to continue being a pastor or whatever, comes next. So
thank you for saying that. And thank you for answering all these questions. We, at the very end here, we do these like 10 kind of rapid fire questions. And so just whatever comes to you, the first thing that comes to you, just say it. Okay. All right. Okay. Question number 1. Which food could you eat every day?
Ice cream.
What's your favorite movie genre?
Action.
Nice. Salty, sweet, or savory?
Savory.
In addition to the Bible, which book would you have with you on a deserted island?
Oh gosh. Do I even know that? Let me think. It's like the furthest thing from my mind.
Okay, we'll pass. We'll go to the next one. What fills your cup?
Yeah, I guess the daily exercise.
Nice. What depletes your cup?
Just having too many worries, too many anxieties.
What's your favorite holy place?
The retreat center in San Juan Bautista.
Oh, cool. What is one piece of good advice that you have been given?
To what? To breathe.
What does rest look like for you?
Rest is just getting away on vacation, away from work and home, and yeah.
Nice. And this is the last question. What do you hope God will say to you when you enter the pearly gates?
Welcome home.
Everybody, this is the Reverend Clark Brown. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so grateful for the conversation.
This has been the Serrano Brothers podcast. Thanks for listening.